This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so we'll go back to full screen. There we are. So just to explain again for the recording is we typically leverage data from Meditech each night that is done through an integration overnight when no one's in the system to pull employee demographics like the name, the ID, seniority information, even contact information, where they work, who they report to. So the information is in Kronos so that you can begin doing scheduling and time for your employees. So build that employee schedule, each pay, create the time cards, and of course send that information to Meditech for payroll processing. And as I explained earlier, part of that can be hours, including shift premiums and overtimes and earnings if desired. Payroll will then have the ability to determine when that file will go into Meditech to begin that gross to net calculation. Now I was actually just going to jump directly into the demo. So I'm actually going to go in as a nurse manager at this point. So we're going to log in here, and I've already done so to kind of speed this up. And I just want to make sure, can everybody see the screen where it shows Kronos and Doris logged in? Okay. Just want to make sure it flipped over well. So up at the top, when Doris logs into the system, now she can use different browsers. In this case, I'm using Microsoft Edge, but you can use Chrome, IE, Firefox, all of those things. What you'll notice is at the top, Doris has a bunch of alerts that are configured. Now this may be different than what you've done, but just to explain what alerts are, for example, Doris has an alert for exception. And in Kronos, an exception is the difference between what was scheduled and what was actually worked. So if you're using time capture, such as the InTouch terminals, or people are keeping time and adding it via mobile devices, things like that, those are those differences that are captured. And then she can actually see which employees are affected and go directly to them. She can also see schedule alerts because she uses the advanced scheduling, where that means she has employees that need to be replaced, so it creates open shifts. And that's what this number indicates, is that she has 2 open shifts down here, which she can see, that need to be filled. So 2 employees will have to be called in or assigned these shifts so that their holes in the schedules are filled. She can also see requests. So the request manager alert tells her how many time off requests, shift swaps, or requests to cover that she may have. Also, she's set up an overtime alert. So this tells her if Martha keeps working what she has, she'll reach the overtime threshold by the end of the week. So again, these are configurable alerts, really meant to draw users like Doris's attention to them so she knows what needs to be fixed, rather than her looking through the system for problems in time cards, for example. She uses her exceptions alert to go ahead and edit and fix those prior to payroll. Now, to explain the rest of her user interface, she has a search little button here, so she can look up an employee's name with a partial name, or even a unit. So for example, she wants to look up a specific employee. She opens a search window, she types in a couple letters, and what will happen is it'll allow her to look up an individual or an area. So for example, if she types in the letters BL, hits enter, it gives her a person as well as people who have a specific skill set, for example. So if she wanted to look at Anna, she can see kind of a snapshot of information of Anna's abilities, where she works, her wage, all of that stuff, any rules that are applied to her down here. So really just a snapshot. So it's meant to be a quick search tool for Doris. Up at the top here, she may have other workspaces. So for her own self-service information might be in the top here, or things like her information or getting help might be kept in there so she can access it, but it's not on her main dashboard. Her landing page is the schedule because that's what she's mainly focused on, to make sure she has all the employees in and where they should be. And she also has menu options down the side here. Depending on what she has access to and what she does, this is configurable as well. So again, depending on your role in the organization will be what you open as your landing page and what you have in your menu options. So in this schedule, she can see here the employees' names. She also has a bunch of configurable columns that she's added to it. So she sees the area they work in, what job, her status, meaning are they full-time, part-time, casual, that kind of thing. She can have information around skills, certifications, seniority, FTE hours, scheduled hours during the period she's looking at, whether they have any overtime, are they on site? So if she's using the InTouch terminals, she can see if anybody has swiped in, those kind of things. She also has the ability to look at configurable date ranges. So she can look at the whole schedule at a time, the next schedule, previous, specific date range, just one day, past or forward, and even range of dates. She can look at all the units she's responsible or departments, or she can narrow it down and say, you know what, I just want to look at Med-Surg 1 RNs, for example. And what this does is filter the schedule view just to Med-Surg 1 RNs or others that are scheduled on the unit as a Med-Surg 1 RN. I'm going to increase the size of this, just maximize it, so it's a little easier to view. Now, right now, she's looking at yesterday plus 6 days, so she can see Tuesday the 23rd. She can see today, that orange highlights that that's where she is in time, including the line that says the time of day. And then she can see forward from there. You'll notice she can see open shifts at the top. She also has availability turned on. If she doesn't like availability turned on, she can go here and actually turn it off so that the background is just white. She can see any scheduled shifts in blue, any time off will be in green, and open shifts are red. And again, she has the ability to close or open this, make it a little easier to view. She's going to go ahead and close that window. So again, she can switch the date, she can switch locations. I'll put it back to all home locations so you can see everybody. At the bottom, you'll notice there's some tools that are available to Doris. So depending on what she wants to use, it can be indicators, which will tell her the cost of a schedule. Now let's do a range of dates. Let's do a full week. She does Sunday through Saturday. I'll just do so you can see what that looks like. So she can see, for example, for scheduling period, what the cost is down at the bottom here, as well as the employee hours that are scheduled. And these are optional. You do not have to have these. These are just ways to do it. Now you'll notice it says cost in here, but she does have the earnings in the system and can view them. So that is, again, a profile that you can allow or not have access to rates, for example, but just see simply the hours. That really allows you to look at budget and see if you're meeting those requirements. Same thing can be done where you can set up metrics depending on what you might use. You can set up things called daily coverage. So your daily coverage requirements you look by job to see how many employees you have covering each job to make sure you have your coverage set in place. So for example, here we can see the ICU RNs where we have 6 scheduled and 6 planned, so we're balanced, whereas Sunday looks like we were actually short. And I usually recommend color coding this to make it easy to see that green is good and balanced, yellow's a warning that you're undercovered, and red would tell you when you're overcovered. And what it does is looks at your total shifts, but you can actually drill down further and look at all the shifts that are that day to see spans of time, or you can even get down into as narrow as 1 hour a day, or even days, evenings, nights, depending how you set things up in your system. Other tools she has is the ability to view rule violations. It's a little small, but you might be able to see here, Fernanda, sorry, I can't even say her name, Bowman, has an exclamation mark beside her name. As Doris clicks on it, she can see she's violating a rule of the minimum time between shifts. She's working too short a time in between. So it just gives you information around that. Again, these will be based on the scheduling rules that you'll have configured for the Guelph General. So you may have different rules for ONA versus your other unions, pardon me. And those will be flagged in there so that Doris can see them. There's also a tool called the Staffing Assistant. It's similar to the call list, and it really allows you then to take an open shift and find replacement. So notice it defaults to the most recent one or the one that's soonest. So tonight we have somebody called in sick for evenings and RPN. We can actually go ahead and load a pool of employees. The system will filter and sort through the setting based on your rules to find the most eligible employee. And in this case, I filter out all my people who may be in overtime first so that I can see in seniority order who I should offer the shift to. And in this case, I may only have one person who's not in overtime. So you have the ability to have multiple lists available to you, to have things like allow overtime the second time through. So if we offered the shift to Stephanie and she said no, we would have to go into the next one. And there is the ability, of course, to log the outcome saying she said yes or no. Now, if you're using auto shift callout or auto callout system, this would actually be sent to auto callout to offer the shift to the employees in their choice of communication method. So whether it's by text, email, or phone call. So a different example of a list is maybe I want only people who are part-time or casual who are available and who can work the job, have the right skill sets. Things like that can be done. And I want it in seniority order, for example. Any questions so far? Is this making sense of the tools that she has available to her?
Just trying to follow her around.
You're having
Yeah.
trouble following the
Well,
mouse?
it's just the first time looking at it, right?
Okay.
Oh, okay, this is your first time looking at it. Okay. So what this is at the bottom is here is, again, a list of employees that could come in and work the shift that would not cost overtime. That's the idea here. So just different tools that you have at your fingertips. Now, I should explain along the top here, the shifts. You can see the days of the week. You can see the dates. And these are shift labels, and it might be different for each area. So whereas a 12-hour night and day, or even a hybrid of 8s and 12s in a nursing unit might be this way, you might have shorter shifts in dietary or in some of the other areas. It'll look different depending on what your schedule looks like. But these are configurable shift labels. So again, you can use up to 20 characters to build your shifts to say the date, to show the time of a shift. What I'm going to do is just open up a shift so you can see what the information inside a shift looks like. And these are all pre-built for you. And typically, you assign a schedule to employee that rotates forever in what we call a pattern. So it's just taking a second to load here. So inside that shift template, it holds the information of what type of shift is it. You might have on-call, for example, or other types of shifts where it's a transfer to a different area. It holds the start end time as well as the length of the shift, and you can even have certain skills associated with the shift. You can edit the shift label at any point in time if you need to, and add comments and notes to it if you need to do so. Now you notice most of my employees are already pre-scheduled because they have patterns. Right-clicking on employee allows a pattern to be assigned to them. And a schedule pattern is simply this. It's I work the same shifts over and over again that repeats that pattern. So for example, if I work a 6-week rotation, it might be that way. In this case, Eleanor works a 9-week pattern. I'm going to open it so you can see this pattern. And this will rotate forever and a day until I tell it to stop. So you can see that her schedule just rotates and repeats. So this 9-week pattern will rotate throughout the year once assigned to her. And all I need to do as an end user is to approve things like requests or add sick time when she calls in, things of that nature, so that I'm not rebuilding the schedule every 4 weeks, for example. All I need to do is deal with the exceptions or changes to the schedule. Now you can also have weekends and holidays, like you'll notice the holiday is highlighted. When I hover over it, it shows your Easter holiday. These are pre-built as well into the system. You'll define which holidays are applicable and how they appear on here will be in that red. And when you hover over them, it will show that. Now from an employee perspective, when they're in self-service, they will also be able to see holidays on their schedule view. So a lot of information around here. Now, is there anything specific you want to see in scheduling, any how-tos, like you interested in how, if somebody calls in, what does it look like? If they're calling in sick or things like that?
Sure.
Sure, okay. For people who are new to it, I thought it might be helpful if you can see that process. So let's find somebody who's on tonight. Okay, so we will say that James is going to call in sick for his night shift. You can come in here, and there's 2 ways of doing it. You can right-click on a shift. It'll allow you to add a pay code, for example. That's where you would add sick time. Or you can go up to the top where there's quick actions and choose a code. So you'll notice it's defaulting to sick. I use that an awful lot. At this point, it allows you to say how much time do you want it for? Is it the full day or is it just part day? In this case, we'll leave it for the full scheduled day. This is what the ability to create an open shift. If James does not need to replace, this can be unchecked. It doesn't create a new shift to be filled. It just is finished when you're done. In this case, we'll show you the create open shift. So it will open up another shift to allow that shift to be replaced. What it does also is mark him unavailable. So if you're looking to fill a shift, he's unavailable for the next 24 hours in this case because he's off ill. We can say repeat for a number of days. So if James is scheduled for the rest of the week and he's not coming in for the rest of the week, I could say repeat for 3 or 4 days, for example, and it would take all of those shifts out at once. You can add a comment. For those who don't know what comments are, they're just a generic reason or a code that you want to add to it. For example, if you're approving things or he's got a doctor's appointment or he's off sick himself, maybe it's an illness, and you might want to note that he's got the flu or something like that. So these notes are configurable and can be freeform. When we hit apply, what happens is Doris will see that James will be coded off the shift as sick. This will automatically update his time as well. So when it goes to payroll, it'll show this sick day. Can everyone see the green now? So this is what Doris would see. And then up at the top, that night shift is now open to be filled. She hits save. She's going to get an error warning because there are violations in her schedule. You do not have to have this error warning turned on, but I just show it for demo purposes. That she says, yes, I'm aware there might be rule violations, but may need to have them in order to be able to have my scheduled work. So things like overtime might be being worked, for example. And that's okay. You'll notice here she's even put like a workload increase in here to be filled. So these shift labels are totally configurable. She also has the ability to do quick actions where she can assign an employee the shift. So if she knows who's going to take this night shift, she can go ahead and actually click assign on there, take the shift. Yes.
Sorry, just one quick question.
Yeah.
I just have a question about the notes that were filled in for the reason for sick. Who would
Yeah.
So who can see them?
So anybody who has access to view the schedule would be able to see them. So you do have to be conscious of that when using notes.
Okay.
So the employee would be able to view it as well as those who have access to see the schedule. So I would say keep it to generic comments on the most part.
Good question.
All right, so we're just going to assign chat this shift, for example. So when I find the person who's going to work it, I will assign it, and it should just update here. There we go, and save the schedule. So that's essentially how you can quickly assign a shift. You have the ability to move people from one department to the next. So if you have an employee who happens to work throughout the hospital, there is the ability to do a shift transfer where I can say, okay, they're no longer working in Med-Surg 1, maybe they're going to Med-Surg 2 or another area, for example. Simply choose the area they're going to and you can go ahead and pre-schedule and paste it on. What this does is actually in their schedule view, the employee will now be able to view that they're reporting to Med-Surg 2. This will also flow through to their time to say that's where the hours should be charged to, so that when it hits payroll, it's getting coded to the correct account. Also, as a manager, you'd have the ability to quickly add a shift if you need to, add comments, a pay code, copy and paste. So similar to Excel, if you want to copy and paste one shift from one person to the next, or even along the same employee, you can do so, as well as delete. You can lock shifts so that they can't be changed, and you can perform swaps from here. Typically, swaps are done through self-service, but you would have the ability to do so if you needed to. The schedule view can be changed, so you can look not only by employee, but you might want to look by job. So meaning maybe I want to see all my RNs for one department together. So example, you can see everybody in emergency department RNs in one group. And you can see the names on each shift when they're coming in. So it's just a different view of the schedule from here. And from here, you can do the same thing. You can enter time off, maybe view employees' accruals if you want to. So it just depends on your preference on how you like to view the schedule. There's the ability to do it in different ways.
Andrea, I
Yes.
have a question. So if a nurse was looking ahead like 3 days and wanted to just say print a census, a nursing or a staff census for each day, each shift, is that possible?
So under reporting, there are some different options in which you can, sorry, let's just close that. There is something called the daily staffing assignment report, if that's something you're interested in. So when you go into reporting, you'll have the ability to see different reports under scheduling, if everybody can see that now. So I'm in the reports section under scheduler. There are a multitude of reports in here, so it depends how you want to look at things. So the one I was talking about here is staffing sheet daily. There's a detail and a summary. I'll just run one so you can see what it looks like. I'll just do MedSurg 1RNs, for example. Okay, we have everything here. Let's just run that so you can see what that looks like. So it'll just take a minute for this to run. And if it's something you want to set up as a report, when you're in reports, you'll notice the ability here to schedule a report. So you will have the ability to set this up. So maybe it runs at the same time every day if it's something you need on the unit, and set it to go to a specific printer or email to a specific person, for example. Let's just open this. I'm not sure if you can see this, but you can see the planned and the variance as well as who's coming into each unit. It's a very small one, but maybe what I can do is increase it. Is that a little better?
Yeah, thank you.
Does that make sense then, the ability to run something along this side? So you can see who's working the 12-hour days, the charge shift, 8-hour days, night, evenings, nights, so on for each unit, and the planned and the variance will show as well. Now, this is, of course, demo data, so it's not going to be great data, but it's there if you need it. So that's just one option that you might like. There is the ability to print different views of schedules, absolutely. That is just one example of a daily ability to see who's coming in and how many people. Now,
You don't need to do it eventually, but I think initially during the transition, as you go from a paper-based to at least having that backup and just feeling like as you get accustomed to things, it's nice.
yeah, absolutely. Now, there is the ability to build kind of a different sort view of the schedule, depending on how you like to view it. Right now, it's just going alphabetically. But for example, you might have some areas where you do want to view it by a specific field or column in the employee's record. So you'll notice you have the ability to see it by maybe the start of the shift. So I want to see everybody coming in first thing in the morning. So what it does then is each day is sorted. So you can see by days, then by evenings, then nights. So it comes in handy if you're trying to look at things at a time frame, not just throughout the day. So that way it's a little easier to view. So again, these are configurable things you can set up as an organization. Now you have the ability to be able to view the visibility periods and do posts. So you can actually do a physical post of a schedule. When you click post on a schedule, you can also have a notification set up to advise employees that the schedule is posted and to remind them to go in and view it. So not sure if that's something you would like to do, but it is there if you want to do it. You also have the ability to go in and do what we call an unpost. So maybe you want to make a few changes after you post and go, oh no, we need to adjust a couple things. When you click unpost and then repost it again, you could have another notification set up to notify only those employees who had some changes made that there's some changes to the schedule. Any questions on top of that, or is this starting to make a little more sense?
Yes, a couple head nods, yeah, good.
Okay, great. Sorry, I wish I could be there. It'd be a little easier for sure. Time cards. I'm just going to do, we'll say we posted the schedule. What about time? So those of you who may not have seen a time card, this is what a time card looks like in the system. I'm just going to pick someone who has a little bit more time in their card. And again, this is updated automatically from the schedule. So what's been scheduled flows through to the time card. And behind the scenes in timekeeping are some rules that are built in based on your collective agreement or employment standards, or maybe even your hospital policies, to say this is how an employee gets paid. So for example, with Joan Jackson, she's getting her Easter Monday holiday, even though it should be on Monday. It's been put on Sunday. But you can set up holiday credits to pay them their stat holidays. And as well, you can actually see the breakdown of time. So you can see the holiday credit, you can see 75 regular hours. And as things happen, when time is being added, if you're using one of the devices, for example, we'll show you what happens if even through a manual entry. If Joan comes in late, my system's set up to say when she's late, as you'll notice in the 7:15 there on Tuesday. Once that's saved, it triggers an exception saying she's late in. What it also does, just draw your attention to this over here, is it actually changed her paid time to 7.25 hours, so it docked 15 minutes pay. Now, of course, I can go in here and add LOA, or I can add some vacation time or something. You can also add comments as to why she may have been late if you want to be able to track that, because this may come in handy. Everything on a schedule and a time card creates an employee calendar to help with attendance so that you can see any pattern. So if it's always, the last Tuesday of the month that Joan is late, maybe she's late due to getting a flat tire, you could see that in her calendar. You also have the ability to say, you know what, that's okay, let it be docked. I can mark it as reviewed, and once it turns green, it's no longer an exception. So this number would not increase, it would start decreasing as I correct those exceptions. It also has the ability, let's say today she ends up staying till 7 o'clock at night. It's smart enough to add on extra time if she should have it. So we'll do a calculate total, just push it to calculate. And you'll notice that it's adding overtime to her. But I'm actually going to say she's an 8-hour person, so she only gets paid 7.5. I'm going to add a rule, change it from her home rule, just to show you what happens. If I'm using an 8-hour rule and she works a 12-hour shift, can everybody see this little clock here? It actually creates overtime that requires approval. So it adds, for example, 4 hours overtime. Now you have the ability here to approve the overtime or not, and you do have an overtime approval process that you're setting up to do something similar to this, where the employee will request overtime, you'll be able to approve it and move it. But the idea is the system can help you with the calculations of that. You don't necessarily need to know all of the nuances and ins and out of exactly when shift premiums start, end, and all of that. That will be taken care of in the time. At the end of each pay, all the employees' time cards, we always advise an approval process. So you can set up an approval process. In this case, I'll walk you through one that I've set up. It's what we call a workflow. It basically says, who do I want to approve? Let's approve all the employees that Doris is responsible for. You have the ability to set this up and configure how you want people to walk through this. So this question mark gives instructions to you as end users to say, this is how you approve the time card. So once you decide who you're approving, the next step would be to make sure there's no outstanding issues before it goes to payroll. So really making sure there's no time missing, really, so that clean when it goes to payroll and prevent any payroll adjustments that might be required. So you'll notice here it says, find anybody that might have exceptions, resolve them, and send it forward. And the ability to approve. So you do have the ability to mass approve all your employees. So what I'm going to do is show you a view, which we call a genie, and I'm just going to do reconcile time cards here. And reconcile time cards allows you to see the employee, each employee, and the hours they have in specific pay codes. So you'll notice here I can see John, he has 7.5 hours of regular. I can see Eva has 48 hours regular plus weekend premium for 32 hours. All of that's in here. Any overtime would be displayed, any on-call, whatever pay reasons you may have, you can choose to have those displayed. You'll also know there's columns to show approvals. So if I am happy as a manager here, I can see the total employees, I can see all the hours worked broken out into productive and non-productive, meaning worked versus time off. And of course the totals. If I'm happy with them, I simply select all rows and approve. Payroll can take it a step further and they can do what's the sign off, or you can have managers do the sign off. And what a sign off does is lock the time card down so that changes can't be made while payroll is actually trying to reconcile with Meditech and process payroll. So again, this really allows you to ensure things aren't changing while payroll's working away on it. So once it's been approved, it'll show the manager's been approved. So payroll could have a view that shows them the managers that have approved and who hasn't approved, because maybe they need to follow up to say, okay, are you finished with them? Or remind them too. I also highly recommend setting up a time card approval reminder. That a notification can be emailed to all managers to remind them to have time approved by a certain date so that payroll can be processed. So as that reminder to do this process. Any questions about time cards or time card approvals? Or is that making sense?
I know, so we're good.
Okay. Next, so let's take a look at the request process. So employees will be doing requests through self-service. They'll be routed to you as their managers, or it may be someone else who's doing the approvals, but whoever is going to be doing the approvals has access to what we call the request manager. So the request manager, I should just do the request manager, is where all requests will come into. So whether an employee requests vacation or time off of some kind, or they do a shift swap, or request somebody else to work for them, that will come into this workspace. Now it will sort them by time. So it'll look at next scheduled period, for example, or you can look at specific time frames. Like I can go ahead and look at a period in May to see who's requested time. You can see time off, or you can change it to shift swaps and so forth. They can be approved in here. Now, I always recommend that they have the accruals tab on the bottom so that the approvers can see Joan has 227.5 hours vacation available to her, so they can see that the time is in there. You'll notice here that it shows the employee's name and the type of request. It also shows you the submit date. These are all configurable. You can determine whether or not you want to see all this information or not. For example, I've got seniority date coming in. I can see not only those submitted, but maybe I want to see any that's been approved or denied in that same time period. I may not have anything in there, but I can turn on all status to see how many people I've approved for. And in this case, Joan's the only one. If I want to approve, I can definitely go in here and just click approve, or I can refuse the request. So if I approve it, I can add some notes so that I can refer back to it as a manager to say, yeah, I approved it and here's why, or I denied it and here's why. I also have the ability at this time to say, I don't need to fill this shift for Joan. I could say, do not create a shift, or I can say, I do need to fill the shift. And what happens is, not only will it book Joan off on vacation, it will open up a shift to be filled to replace Joan. So that one click when I approve, it'll update the schedule, which updates her time card, and it'll update the accrual balances once it goes over to payroll. So it'll send that information. It also, you'll notice, added planned vacation time into Joan's accrual view, as well as it will open a shift in the schedule. So all of that is done with that click. You'll also notice it changes the status in here to approved. Now she can also have access to things like request a cover. So in this case, we have an employee, let's just look for where they might have had one, that is looking for someone to work a shift for them. So we can see here that Joan asked Clark to work her shift, and Clark had accepted. So that's what happens. It's been submitted. It still needs that final approval from the manager, but both employees have agreed that Joan's not going to work this shift on May 20th and that Clark's going to cover it. And this was all done through self-service. So Joan submitted a request to cover to Clark. He said yes. Now it's come to Doris to say final approval, where she can approve or refuse the request. If she approves this request, what happens is it takes Joan out of the shift on the 20th and gives it to Clark. So again, it updates both their schedules and their time cards to ensure that Clark is paid for working the shift and not Joan. Any questions so far around self-service, or is this making sense around approvals?
I have a question. So we will assume then that they've done the background work to know that they've asked the right person for that shift switch?
Exactly. So when a request to cover is used, it shows the employee who's marked themselves as available. It can also use the scheduling rules to ensure that they're not asking someone they shouldn't be. So yesterday when I was setting this up as an example, my scheduling rules are turned on, and it actually made Joan take out certain employees because they violated different scheduling rules by offering them the shift.
Okay, I am hearing that they won't have, that the employees won't be able to see seniority. So
That's correct.
So sorry, with the employee not seeing that and me not being able to see that, I'm going to look into that. It's one of those things that we were trying to work out, but it wasn't easily, we weren't easily able to pull in all the seniority, so we were looking at a workaround in the interim, but that's going to be an optimization. Okay, yeah, so we'll follow up on that.
I've got a quick question about this specific example you provided. Are we able to restrict the time frame for shift changes? Meaning, is there a threshold of like minimum 24 hours notice prior to a shift change?
That's more of a process piece than it is the way we got to configure the system, so that's what we'll touch base offline about, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just curious if there was that.
Yeah. Shift swaps, they can also be done through the system. And again, the rules can be checked prior to them being submitted. So for example, if I, as an employee, tried to swap into shift that wasn't enough time between shifts or was causing overtime, I can actually have it be prevented from swapping through those rules validation. So in this case, it's already been checked that Anna and Jody can swap. There's no violations between them. They both have the same, they can do the same thing. For example, if a certification is required and one doesn't have it, it wouldn't allow them to swap. If there wasn't enough hours between shifts and I tried to work back-to-back 12-hour shifts, for example, it wouldn't allow them to swap. So what Doris is seeing at this point is things that have been validated through the rules before it comes in. But she can even view the details here, for example. Maybe she wants to see the notes. So you can see here that Anna asked if she could swap these shifts. And then Jody says, yes, I accept. She can see the communication between the two employees as she's approving these swaps. When she approves the swap, again, this will update the schedule, the time card, and all of that information so that the right people are on the schedule. And if she had denied it, it would also do that. Now, I would also suggest, again, that notifications be leveraged to the employees to say it's been approved or denied, so they're always up to date and know what's going on. They don't have to call you as a manager or whoever may be approving the scheduler to see where it's at. So those are essentially how requests are handled in the system and how you can approve those. And again, it can be done from mobile. It doesn't have to be done from a desktop. I'm just showing you the desktop today. If you're implementing mobile, that may be something that your employees could do as well as you approving. Now, are there any other questions or things you might want to take a look at? We have a bit of time left, and that was just my overview. I was going to go into reports next.
I've got one.
Yes.
Specific to vacations.
Yes.
Is there I saw a report that you could create for a daily report. Is there a report that you can look at specific to showing you what staff were on vacations for what period of time?
So yes, you could actually use the schedule report itself to see who's on vacation. You can also run, if it's already approved and in the schedule, you can actually use some of the time reports as well, depending how far ahead it is. There's the ability to do something called a transactions and totals report, where you can get specific pay codes such as vacation. You could do the same thing for sick to see, and then it shows you everything that's done the day of the week, the totals, and if you have earnings in there as well as the cost. And if you want to look at it from a scheduling standpoint, once approved, again, it'll show in any of your schedule views. This one happens to be one that will export to Excel that you can view the schedule in.
I have a question. So in
Yes.
regards to the vacation thing, if the department has a rule or about how many people can be off on vacation, is that something that can be put in there before the vacation request gets sent in?
Now, we don't have quotas in this system today.
We are looking at an option for, again, under optimization that would allow us to support that from the annual vacation side of things, but it's not going to be ready for fiscal
time. One of the things under reporting that is nice is if you have a report that you like to look at on a regular basis, you can save it as a favorite. So for example, maybe you want to look at overtime, or if you're in nursing, you want to look at casual RNs and their hours that have been worked. You might have a yearly report that you want to look at so you know where you are up to date, and things like sick time or vacation hours, things like that can be saved. There is the ability to run what we call it's called the National Festivals and Holiday Report. I just renamed it and called it Who Worked Last Christmas and New Year's, because you may need to know those things in order for fairness to ensure that it's not the same employees always being scheduled on Christmas Day, for example. There's also the ability to see open shifts. So that means all of those holes in the schedule, you may want to run a report to say, okay, what open shifts do I have as a manager or scheduler to look at those things. It's an example of a sick report. I'll just run it real quick so you can see what it looks like. There's also the ability in here while that's running to do online configurable reports called Genies, and I'll just show you a couple of samples. Now this is just using columns that are in the system that are being pulled together so that I see the information I want to see, and they can be filtered and sorted. Let's see. Absenteeism. So you can have a view that shows you the different types of reasons people might be on leave. And then it will allow you to group and sort either by sick leaves, family leaves, personal, bereavement, absence, just not no-shows, kind of things like that. You can change the time frame to whatever you may need it to be. I'll do a year just so you can see what that looks like. We'll just move forward to March 31st just so you can see an entire year. You can type the date in too, probably a little faster than what I'm doing here. And what I can do then is look at my sick time, for example. Maybe that's what's really important to me as a manager. I can group by this column. So it puts all my employees with sick time. And then what I can do is have it sort ascending. There we go. And you can see who's got the most sick time. So it just gives me a quick snapshot view of what's going on. Those are just some examples. We showed you the reconciled time card. These are ones that I built just for different customers because they've got their seniority information in there. So for example, I can see a list of the full-time RNs on MedSurg 1 and see their seniority information. And you can just sort the different columns, and there's their phone numbers. So just different ways you can sort and view things. Other things, let's see if that report is done, just so you get an idea. Now, some of the reports will open in Excel. So depending on how you run the report and choose it. So this is just an example of all the sick for the past year to give you days of the week, so I can see all the Mondays that Sarah missed and the time. And if you had wages, it would show that as well. It also shows where the entry was made, whether it was done in scheduling or done in timekeeping after the fact. These are just some examples of reports that you could do. Any other questions or concerns? There is, of course, full audit trails capability on all of this. So when an entry is made, it does date stamp with the time, the user, where the entry was done. So there is the ability to track that and report on it if you need it. Any other questions or things you'd like to see? Oh, one thing I'd recommend is, I'm not sure if you took a look at it, but there is a tool called Worksheet that is an Excel plugin that comes as part of Workforce Central that might have some reporting that functionality that you may like if you like to work in Excel. So what it does is allows you to open up your favorite reports or those genies I was just showing within Excel to allow you to do further manipulation of data. It does require a plugin into Excel. You do have to use your Kronos credentials to log in to use the plugin within Excel. So that ensures that people aren't seeing information they shouldn't, of course, and only those who have access to Kronos can pull those types of reports. And it allows you then to, of course, manipulate the data, and you can refresh as things happen. Sorry? Is there a question?
I think someone just opened their line on mute.
Okay. An example is employee calendars. We talked briefly about them before. So you have the ability to see an individual employee's calendars. Let's do current year so far and see what's going on. But what it does is give you a monthly view of things that are going on with the employee, and you can color code different things. So we can see where people are late, we can see where vacation is, and different ideas like that. Now she's not, she's a pretty good employee. We haven't had a lot of sick time, but you may have different employees that have different things going on. And you can look at it different times of frame. Employees can have access to this as well. So you can even track things like where you may have had a time off request denied, and if somebody calls in sick on the same day, you could see those things together. So depending on what you want to set up, you can show in here. It's a great way to keep track of things for an employee and help you look up patterns. Any other questions or things I can show you real quick in the last couple minutes?
Any questions from those on the line? I think we're good. Thank you so much, Andrea. We really appreciate your time.
Not a problem. Thanks for everybody taking time out of their day. I know you're all busy. So if there's no further questions, I will stop the recording and let you all get back to your days.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.